Hey, Bruce.
Hey, long time no talk.
Yeah, I know. How have you been, man?
Good.
Yeah,
How
good,
about you?
good. Doing well. Enjoying the summer so far. I've got my summer shirt on. So,
Yeah, I saw that you got spiffed up today.
yeah, I know. I figured I'd dress up for everybody on the webinar today.
There you go.
So, well, hey, I wanted to go ahead and kick us off today. You guys know that we're doing this webinar series called Maximize. And today we've got Bruce Case. You talk about maximizing your business. Bruce, I was reading your bio, which, I'll make the introduction. I'll have you introduce yourself here in a second. Reading your bio, you've really maximized things at Case over your tenure. I know it's a family business, right? Your dad
Right.
started the company, but you guys have really taken off, and a lot to learn from you and what you've done with the business. And so today, I'll go ahead and kind of introduce this here. So you guys know this is part two of a five-part webinar series. This one here is the second one, Maximize. This is for mostly primary design builds and designers. We're going to be talking a lot about the design build process, the handoff from the office to the field, and how to make that process a little bit more seamless. And if you guys enjoy this webinar, I would prompt you to go ahead and sign up for the remaining webinars we have coming up. Next week's webinar with Steve is going to be focused on really getting into the weeds on how to perfect your sales motion. When we talk about how we sell services from our companies, we're talking about selling design agreements, we're selling build contracts, and ultimately we're selling an experience. So Steve and I are going to talk a lot about how to maximize your potential there. And of course, we're going to talk about content marketing with Logan in a few weeks, as well as Mike, who is a big systems and process guy, just like me. We kind of nerd out with that stuff. But today, we are going to be focused again, like I said, on the design build mechanism. So, Bruce, for those who don't know you, how do you introduce yourself? Who are you, and what gives you the microphone today?
Certainly on a personal level, it's a whole different introduction, but with, with a group of people in a business situation, it's, president and CEO of a family-owned business, Case Architects and Remodelers in the DC market. We have 6 locations around the DC market, about 160 employees, and really focused on quality and the craft and inspiring our clients and our team members as well.
In that case, you guys focus primarily on I would say large scale renovations, but probably for our area, it's probably pretty common, right? But you guys are focused primarily on the kitchens, bathrooms, additions, whole home renovations, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's 2 parts, as you know, but for other listeners to our business, there's the Case Architects and Remodelers that average job size is about 250,000. And as you said, vast array of different projects that are design, build, project management. Clients want soup to nuts. We have a second division called Fred, the first name and home improvement, that's for projects where homeowners just need excellent craftsmanship and they don't need the design. They don't necessarily need as much project management. And that's a separate division. I know today we're going to focus on the design build sort of architects and remodelers side, given the topic.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up though, because that's, I think, something that a lot of design builds find a need for is having, a primary focus on the design build market, larger job sizes, but then you do get some of the smaller job sizes that come through the mix that you want to attend to, but
Right.
ultimately it's kind of like out of the scope of really your bread and butter. So I love your model of creating that separate division to kind of handle those, whether they're smaller projects or just projects where they are maybe less in need of the design side, right? You
Right.
said focus on primarily just the craftsmanship side. So what a great way to keep your production side of your business busy with a lot of that stuff
And
too.
I know this webinar is not about this, but just real quick, it is an entirely separate team. So the
Okay,
carpenters are
good to know.
separate, the sales team are separate. We do share accounting and back office, IT, HR, admin kind of functions across the two, but it is a very different process and a different sort of perspective, not only for the sales team, but for the field team as well, just to mention that.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah, maybe that's another webinar idea. How to launch a another division, and where do you draw the line with what you share
Right.
and don't share, and your sales process, I imagine, is much different there as well. So another webinar for another day, maybe.
Yep.
Perhaps. So most of the people on this webinar kind of know who I am, at least I believe so far. But just to recap, my name is AJ. Owned Cornerstone Remodeling, started in 2011. Founder and CEO. One of my crowning achievements is that I've been able to scale the company up to where I've been able to step away and focus my efforts on another business that we launched in 2022, which is Render. It's a sales acceleration platform. I don't know if you joined very early, you can kind of see the little video in the background, but what we're able to do is take a process that typically takes design builds 3 hours and do it in 3 minutes, digitizing workflows, and even introducing remote engagement, like we're the DoorDash for home improvement, which is really exciting to think about how we can disrupt the industry with that sort of idea. So through building the design build company, we have really focused a lot on streamlining a lot of the processes. You guys heard it here last week, and in previous webinars that we've done and previous discussions that I've had in person. Streamlining your entire company from beginning to end is it takes a lot of work, right? But when you start infusing this idea of streamlining processes when you're dealing with homeowners, customers, and multiple teams, right? You have different parts and pieces of your company and making them work really well together and have people not want to rip their hair out takes a lot of practice, takes a lot of getting used to and trying things and fixing things and perfecting things, tweaking as we go along. And so here we are talking about this design build customer journey. So Bruce, when we chatted about this topic, I couldn't help but paint this like this roadmap of your customer journey. When we started to talk about how you have how you walk the customer through this entire process, all the way from when they pick up the phone or send an email in, right?
Right.
To the time that you are. One of the things we'll get to is how you celebrate the completion of the job, perhaps throwing parties, like sponsoring a party at their house. I think that'd be worth bringing up later. Uh, just the whole idea of your customer journey is an inspiration, and this is kind of what I wanted to get into. So, just to kind of kick off the conversation here, we have a lot of design builds, a lot of designers listening, and uh, I would assume that Case has been a design build from its inception, right? If we go back in your customer history, or sorry, your company history, there was never a transition that you guys made from just being general contractor and then building a design element. Am I right on that?
There actually was a transition. So we started, my dad started the company in 1961. We were called Case Construction Company. And we were a contractor, and, like any small remodeler, it was just him, and he would do what he needed to do to make payroll. And he was the only employee till the early 70s. And over the next 20 years, was focused on the construction side, the production side, did work for architects, third-party architects, things like that, as well as homeowners directly, and got to the point where dealing with third-party architects, he realized that it would be much better for not only himself and the team at Case, but also for homeowners to bring it all into under one roof on one team, as opposed to a third-party architect and a construction company. And that's when we started design build in like 80, 81, somewhere in there. And I think my memory was design build was existed certainly more in commercial construction and other parts of construction, but wasn't very common in the home remodeling business. And I think we were one of the early ones to do that.
Pioneering this idea of in-house design and
Right.
residential construction. I love that. So obviously, we both are cut from the same cloth here. We understand the value, but for perhaps there's a contractor that's going to be listening to this that doesn't have that design engine inside of the company doors. Maybe they're still working with architects, and there's certainly nothing wrong with that business model. It actually works out really well for a lot of people to actually employ subcontractors in design, whether it's interior designers, kitchen designers, or even architects. But it's certainly an asset when you have it inside of the company. Biggest asset that you can name, like what would be the biggest thing? If someone said, Bruce, I'm thinking about, bringing design in house, what's the biggest perk that would be in it for me? What would your thought there be?
The way you're framing that question, the biggest perk, I mean, obviously I'd list a couple, but the biggest one to me would be that's one of the core things we're selling. We're selling design and build. And so if it's a
Yeah,
core thing that we're selling, to outsource that, and all of the, there's good things to that, but there's a lot of challenges to it, and all the challenges that may occur, as opposed to when that's core to your business. I feel like bringing that in-house is critical, where there are other things that aren't as core, like render software, other things. We don't want to be a software company. That's not core. So, okay, outsourcing that or other things makes sense. But when design is
right.
core to what we're doing, to have it in-house is, to me, is critical.
We've seen a lot of control issues when we're getting
Sure.
designs coming from outside. You know, we still entertain some designs that come through from customers that come from architects, but ultimately we don't discount our rates. We kind of dive right back into the design mechanism anyway, because really when we're walking a homeowner through that process, we need to understand the design just as much as an outside architect did. And the only way to truly do that for us is to have a hand in actually creating that space. And when we talk about value, building the value into this process, really starting from understanding the homeowner's needs from the very beginning, and then building on top of that, there's a lot of value for the homeowner when they're dealing with the same crew from start to finish, right? They're not dealing with this company and then they're dealing with this company and then that company,
The
right?
one hand to shake is the way I like to say it. Yeah.
I like that. So starting off, I have this thing. So starting off the right foot. Now, obviously, you guys do design agreements, so you're getting paid to do this design. There may be some on the call that aren't getting paid, or maybe they're getting paid for some design work and maybe not all of it. There's a lot of different ways to do this, but working with Case, this usually means some sort of discovery call or some sort of introductory meeting. Can you talk us through that process?
Sure. So the sort of initial
Yeah,
touches, if you will, it really, to me, starts when a client, a homeowner, reaches out to us to begin with, and most of it, probably like most listeners, come through the web at these days. So we actually created a way for that customer journey that customers can right there on the website, real time, pick a day and time to meet with us, so that we don't have back and forth. We sort of looked at that step and said, that's not a great experience to play phone tag 3 or 4 times. So we do that.
highlight that one. So for anybody who's listening, highlight that frictionless sign
Exactly.
up or frictionless experience on the front end goes a really long way. So we just implemented that with Cornerstone over the last year. They can
Yeah.
sign up for an appointment using Calendly. But sorry, go ahead and
Yeah,
continue.
no, that's great. So we do that, and then once it's assigned, then it's a warm-up call, which is a critical part in our process. It could be a video call or just a phone call with the homeowner to understand their needs, desires. It's not a qualifying call, and I want to stress that for us, it's an educational call. And sure, that there's a fine line between education and qualifying, but the attitude has got to be education. And then we go out and meet with the homeowner, no charge. Usually it's about an hour and a half, depending on the job size. It could be a little longer, a little shorter. Meet with them in their home, ideally both decision makers if there's two, but whoever they are. But sometimes the reality is, in today's world, it's hard to get both people there. So there's times that we'll just meet with one decision maker. And obviously part of that in-house meeting is to understand their needs, goals, the existing conditions, the project, talk a little bit about some important things to them, the budget. And it's obviously wide ranges at that point, just talking about those kind of ranges. It's also timelines critical to understand, are there pressures or not. And then third, are we a good fit? Telling them about our value proposition, understanding what they're looking for. And we have some different tools that do those types of things. And then assuming it's a good fit from there, then our next step is what we call a case study, where we get 1% of the middle of that budget range that we've discussed with them for, let's say, a kitchen renovation. And they pay that to us. And that there's a couple bullets under that. Again, it's called a case study. First of all, it's a lower fee than a lot of our competitors charge. A lot of our competitors in the DC market might charge 5 to 10% to do some initial to measure to do as builds, to come up with 3 or 4 design options, budgeting around those options. We charge a little less for a couple of reasons. One is because we have that design in-house, so we have the ability to do that. Whereas if it's outsourced, it's hard to do that because an outsourced design firm is going to charge differently. Number two is we see it as sort of a test drive. It gives the client and us a chance to test drive. We lose money on that, candidly, but we feel like we're putting our money where our mouth is. And then from there, assuming things go well, again, we do as-builts, we do 3 design schemes, budgeting around those schemes. Then we'll do 1 rendering, sort of realistic, photorealistic rendering. Then the next step is a 7% retainer. So we actually have two design retainers in our process. And then that
I like that.
second retainer we call contract documents. It's again 7% of the range and allows us to really get the project manager involved, which we can talk more about in a minute. We get subcontractors, trade specialists out on the job to get fixed prices. We pick all the products. Clients come into our design studios to work through a sort of curated process of selections. And then we end up to contract. And at that point, we've got a fixed price contract. All the selections are made, production's bought into it, which again, we can dive into it as you'd like. But
Yeah, it's funny. We have an almost identical process at Cornerstone. We have a discovery call up front where we're just really it's focused on education. We learn about their needs, and then
right.
ultimately we're kind of educating them on how the process works and finding that mutual fit. Moving forward with a design agreement, very similar. We have a very small fee up front, which really just gets our feet on the ground, understanding the space. We produce what we call a first pass estimate, so it's still pretty high level. It's a little bit better than a ballpark. We're actually pricing some things out, but we have a lot of allowances, kind of some vague ideas of how vendors will come in price wise, just to let the homeowner know, yes, we are on track for this vision, and we can do it for roughly about this price. We can do that for multiple different scenarios as well. And then ultimately, when they do decide to move forward into the actual meat of like making selections and so on, we also get our project managers involved in that
Mhm.
process. So we will talk about that. So it's actually a really good segue, right? Because the next bullet point here is bringing in the PM support.
Yep.
Now, this was a big step for us at Cornerstone because our project managers were, I'll call them hands-on project managers, almost site supervisors. They were stepping in to meet some carpentry needs that were existing in the field. For us to free their time up so that they could come into the office more, that took a lot of work for us to get them in a position to be a better project manager, meaning they're really having to split their time really well between managing projects in the field and also spending a lot of time in the office. And when they first heard this idea of coming into the office to do some work there, I think their first instinct was, I just have to catch up on my paperwork, receipts, time cards, like double checking vendor bills. But what you just said was you are actually getting your project managers involved with the project earlier on. So you guys are actually getting them involved prior to there being a construction contract in place. Is
Right.
that right?
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
how early are project managers at Case getting introduced to a particular project? At
Right.
what stage does that typically happen?
Well, like all of us, they're certainly available as a resource and a knowledge base at any time, but specifically they get a project manager gets assigned at that, in our case, that second retainer step, which would be that 7%. So at that point, we've got, a pretty serious commitment from a client. About 98% of those go forward to contract. So at that point, it's sort of a real project, quote unquote. The details still need to be refined. So we assign a project manager, and then that project manager starts to interact more with the salesperson. We call sales teams project developers here, and they're separate from
Same.
designers. So they interact with the project developer. They'll talk about which trade specialists should we have come out to this job. And then when we do a walkthrough before, as we're getting pricing together, part of our process is to do a trade specialist walkthrough where it's the subcontractors, the project manager. That's when they'll first meet the homeowner. It's sort of, 8 people show up kind of thing, the plumber, the
It's a
electrician, the
big day.
project
Yeah.
managers. They're looking for opportunities on the project, but candidly, they're mostly looking for challenges that may arise because we want to figure those challenges out before we go to a fixed price contract or have surprises because nobody likes change orders. Um, so that's when they first really get assigned, as I say, but also get out to see the job.
One question that came through, not in our chat box, but over here is, do you bring out multiple vendors to the walkthrough? So vendors probably meaning subcontractors. Do you
Yeah.
do you bring out multiple of the same, like two or three different plumbers, or you primarily do you focus on this is the guy I want to use for this job? I'm going to bring them out to bid this project.
Yeah, it's a great question. So let me just back up 10,000 feet real quick and then come back to your direct question. So in our case, we have what was called an alliance program where we'll only use subcontractors that are approved in our alliance program, which means they have to be approved. So that's insurance, licensing. We check their pricing roughly versus what we have. So first of all, we'll only bring out people in our alliance program. Directly to your question, we've talked about that over the years. I mean, I think in sort of the bubble, it makes sense to bring two plumbers, two electricians and all, but in our case, on the front lines, real world, to have those people show up, I think would create some animosity and some challenges. And
I
so
agree.
what
It's
we
all
do
about
is
relationships, right? So,
exactly, I mean, real
yeah,
worlds. So we'll bring out one electrician, one plumber, blah, 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 in the walkthrough. If then as we get bids back, or if it's a very large scope, let's say the electrical on this job is complicated and large, we might bring a second electrician out at a separate time. But that's probably 10 to 15% of the time we'll do that. So it's
yeah.
not super common.
Yeah, same here. Sometimes what we'll do is we'll get our feet wet with a couple of different subcontractors. Well, like you said, if there's a complicated job, we may send this ahead of time to a couple of different subcontractors just to get their thoughts. Sometimes we're just verifying that this type of work they want to kind of get into, right? So some of
Yeah,
our smaller HVAC technicians may not be fit to, do some very complicated or elaborate HVAC systems in some of the projects we do. We'll send it to a couple and just figure out, okay, who might be the best one to bring out. But once we lock and load on one particular sub, that's usually one that we're bringing out. I think, like I said, it's all about the relationships and also for the homeowner seeing us with a couple of different subcontractors, like getting multiple bids. It almost seems, I don't know, it feels to me like that would kind of diminish the experience for the homeowner
right,
because we're just trying to find the cheapest price. So
right.
we definitely don't want to have that perception going out to the homeowner about our company. Um, so I have one here like promoting collaboration. So this was something that we saw at Cornerstone, and I think you guys have this at Case where getting project managers to collaborate with the salespeople, with the project developers. This is a huge asset. Getting them involved with the process that early, from really that second retainer, so without a doubt, well, maybe primarily without a doubt, that this customer is really going to be moving forward. We don't have a construction contract in place yet, but it's highly unlikely if they're paying 7%. At Cornerstone, it's 4% of the likely outcome of the budget. They're not really going to go anywhere. They're not walking away from that amount of money. So we know that they are interested in doing the project enough to get the project manager's time into this project. But how involved are your project managers? Are they helping with pricing? Are they helping like meeting subcontractors or cutting holes? Are they doing a lot of the investigative work? How much are they actually assisting the project developer in putting together the final drawings as well as the final estimate for that
Right.
space?
So I guess a couple thoughts on that. First of all, in our world, the project developer, the salesperson is the lead, is the captain of the ship until it's sold. So the project manager is there to assist in any way needed. If it's cutting some holes or there's some uncertainty about this or that, they certainly will do that. If they see challenges, I mentioned that walkthrough with the subcontractors a minute ago. If they see issues, challenges, obviously they all talk about it. They talk about timeline because at least in our jurisdiction, we put start and finish dates on the contract. So that's obviously the project manager needs to determine that and talk about that. And then also, in addition to that walkthrough we've talked about, 48 hours before the contract is presented to the client, a minimum of 48 hours, the full package needs to be given to the project manager for review. And that's the contract, the estimate, all the sub bids, the whole caboodle, the drawings. So that basically that's the project manager's opportunity to review everything, make sure that it's set up for success in terms of the overall project, the scope of work, the budget. And to us, that's a critical step because that way the project manager is essentially buying into the project, which is key. Because if it's just in the old days when we didn't do that, it was just kind of, oh, we sold this project, here you go. And it, to
Yeah.
me, empowerment relates to accountability. We can't hold production project managers accountable for client experience, GP, other things like that if we don't empower them to stop the train before it happens, to look at things. So
Plausible deniability, right? The project manager can say, "Well, I wasn't aware that
yeah, and they
this
weren't.
was
If
the
they don't get
desired
to see
outcome."
it,
Yeah,
it's true. They weren't aware. Yeah.
yeah. Raise your hand if if you've ever had that conversation with your project managers in the field.
Yeah.
Goodness. So, I love the 48-hour review. So in that packet, let's dissect a little bit of that. So in that packet, we're talking right at construction contracts. So you guys have fleshed just about everything out, right? It's
Right.
from all of the selections, all of your allowances, probably mostly in part, right? So there may be a few that don't fully get fleshed out by this point, but for the most part, everything scope wise should be 100% figured out. They might not
Yep.
have the actual faucet picked out for the shower, like the shower head, but we do know that it's a three-way diverter with a handheld and a range shower head, right? So scope wise, they should be understanding everything. And you are producing uh, all these documents for them, right?
Right. Right.
All the
Yeah.
selection
And then
documents.
usually the shower head is picked out, by the way, but yeah, yeah.
I like that.
There'll be a couple
We
allowances, like a permit allowance, because we don't know the exact permit fees. Usually
right.
there's a drywall patch allowance because we don't know exactly how many holes we're going to put in. And there might be a couple others, but it's 99% fleshed out.
It's definitely something that we're trying to achieve is the 99% fleshed out. Yeah,
Right.
so I think we try to push jobs through the pipeline sometimes a little too fast. I don't know if too fast, but sometimes we're trying to fill some gaps in our schedule. We'll kind of push
Sure.
jobs through where before things are fleshed out all the way. But ultimately, that 99% certainty on having everything done for the customer, I think the most, it's a little bit more relaxing to know that, okay, all my work is done. I can kind of relinquish control of this project, right, over to Case and their project manager because my work here is done,
Right.
right? So let's talk about something that I didn't write up here, but you guys produce multiple design sets, right? So
Right.
drawing sets for different audiences. Can you let everybody know about that?
Sure. I mean, there's certainly iterative drawing sets through the process with, as we could work through initial design schemes. But when it comes to the true drawing sets, the first set we'll do is the contract set, that has those details for the homeowner. And it's really what we try to focus on with each set, but let's say that set is who's the audience. In that case, the audience is really the homeowner. And how do we communicate in a way that they can understand? Because I think we can all agree most homeowners respectfully don't know how to read two-dimensional drawings and elevations and things like that we sort of take for granted. So we've been trying to do a lot more with illustrations, pictures, for instance, the material schedules, the selections they make. We used to put a K, Kohler, K, blah, 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 faucet, and nobody, they don't know what that is. So now we still put that, but then we put a picture of it and put a picture of the cabinets, put a picture of all these different things as an example. The next set that we'll do once the contract is signed by the homeowner is a permit set. Again, who's the audience? It's the reviewers, right? They don't care if it's a K, blah, 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 and they don't need to see a picture of it and all of that. So it's
Right.
much more focused, tailored to what they need to see, which tends to be more structural, certain calculations depending on the jurisdiction and things like that. So we strip off the things that don't apply and put on things that may apply more to them. And then the third set we do is the actual construction set, which we put in a red, is binded with red paper so that we all know that's the construction set. And that one essentially is a combination of the two, essentially, because the project, obviously production needs to see the things that were in the permit set, but they also need to see what was in the client's contracted set. And the other thing is the pictures and things really help the carpenters because when they open up the box, they don't know what a Kohler blah, blah, blah is either. And so if they can see a picture, and sometimes the box might say it's this, but I'm sure we've all experienced that you open the box and maybe it's something different and they
Right.
install it and the homeowner's like, what's going on? So that's the third set we do.
Yeah, I saw at one of the conferences that you and Bill were at that you had some examples of your drawing sets that you've done, and they're beautiful. I guess maybe perhaps we were looking at one of the ones for either your project managers or for the contract, but seeing the actual selections inside of these field drawings, kind of like in groups of areas that they're going in, I feel like that is very valuable for your field to understand. Okay, so in this bathroom, everything's brass. So if
Right.
I open something up and I have something that's stainless, hey, there's a red flag, right? It's just one extra layer of protection when you're giving the contractors, the project managers, more information up front, and vice versa. The county or the city, the jurisdiction, the less information, the better in some
Right.
cases, because you might end up having them ask questions that really they shouldn't be even asking. But if you open up that can of worms, then
Yeah,
they'll
and
likely hop
and
in,
there's
right?
even I'll call it administrative logistic things that they want to see for the county, let's say, on the set of plans that the homeowner doesn't care about. We did have one question that I just popped up. The question is, so your specifications are on your plan sets, rather than a separate document question mark. And for us, yes, the specifications
Yeah.
are on the plan sets. We do that for the main reason we do that is because as we work through the project, again, think about the audience, our carpenter is going to read through a 10-page, 15-page narrative contract. Probably not. Some might, but we want to have everything on the plan set as much as possible for the
Correct.
project. That's how we do it.
We treat
And then,
our plans like a picture book for,
right,
and not to like respectfully again, for our project managers, they're just busy and
yeah,
they're trying to orchestrate a lot of things, so they really only want to dig into one particular to extract one particular piece of information. And I would say the easiest way, because my brain, I was a project manager, I worked in the field. My brain works this way too. If I want a piece of information, I'm going to go to where I know I can find it. And if it's in that plan set in the dining room, and
right,
I'm really trying to figure out what's happening over here, I'm going to go look at the dining room on the floor plan, because what we'll do is we'll put notes that say we are adding wainscoting to these three walls, but not this one, right? So we'll do that and we'll put the details on that drawing. I think, with allowances, sorry, not allowances, the selections that you're making to same kind of value that you're providing to the project managers in the field.
right. And then for us, and it sounds like you're similar, AJ, the actual contract itself is more boilerplate wording, um,
Yeah.
as opposed to the like, so yeah,
It's legalese, right? It's going
right,
to make sure that we're protected and the homeowner's protected. That yes, we have covered 21 recess lights in this space.
right,
Uh, where are they going exactly? Refer to the electrical plants, right? So we're going to detail those, and hey, we're going to put two above the sink instead of one because we know that there's a beam that's kind of centered above this window. Things like that. Finding them on the plan, our carpenters, our project managers are going to go there to look for
right.
that level of information all the time. So obviously the drawing sets and the 48 hours. So yeah, let's go back to this 48-hour review. I'm going to kind of tie this into another piece of this conversation, which is how the project managers are compensated for their production volume, right? So you guys bonus on gross profit, right? Gross profit produced or gross profit percentage that is brought into the company. Is that right?
Yeah, it's gross profit dollars that a project manager manages. They get a percent of that.
Got it. Got it. So obviously, gross profit for anybody who was on the webinar last week is probably one of the most important things for business owners to track and to make sure that you're pulling gross profit numbers off every single time like clockwork. What goes into that has two pieces, two components, right? How the job was bid, but then how the job was produced.
Right,
So the more documentation you're doing early on, the more that you're really handling a lot of the stuff up front. But in the event that the sales guy forgets a framing package, no joke, that happened to us one time. The quantities were accidentally left at one
mm-hmm.
for all of our framing pieces. So, we're looking at this like, why do we have $8 for 2x4s on this job?
Yeah,
And certainly enough, there was one 2x4 that was bid
yeah,
for the
yep,
project. So how this 48-hour review is really to make sure, one, seamless transition, the project manager understands what's going on in the job, but how does this help with accountability for his or her gross profit percentage, right? For
right.
this bonus.
So you start out the webinar by talking about collaboration and the teamwork and at a high level, I feel to get that, there's a couple key parts. One is that we're all pushing the same wheelbarrow in the same direction. And if it's GP, then let's put our money where our mouth is. And, the compensation structure, I think is important because, it's not number one for everybody, but people do need to make a living. So in our case, we pay project developers based on the gross profit dollars that they sell and that get produced. Project managers are paid on the gross profit dollars they oversee. Carpenters are bonused if they can bring a job in better than the estimated gross profit dollars. So we've tried to line things up. And then back to the 48-hour review, you can imagine that's pretty critical if I'm a project manager and my compensation is determined based on the gross profit dollars that come out of this project. It's kind of pretty important to me that it's bid where I think is fair. And so that in that review, there's typically going to be a little back and forth on 2 or 3 items. Maybe the project is a primary bathroom on the second floor of a row house in DC where parking's hard, trash pickup's hard, and maybe they feel like I need a little more access or demo or, that kind of money in the project. And so then and if they're reasonable requests back and forth, the team works it out. Because again, they're all based on the same thing. The salesperson doesn't want the job to tank either. But once in a while, there's a little bit of a tug of war. The salesperson typically is trying to focus on a budget and try to hit a budget for a homeowner. The project manager stereotypically is going to want to add a little bit extra for it. So once in a while, management has to get involved, but 85-90% of the time, the team works it out. So the project manager will do that review. And then on this slide, then the bullet point under that, the reality is then the project manager will go back. There'll be a couple revisions, or maybe they'll talk about, hey, we weren't sure about this detail. We need to put some disclaimer in the contract to say, we're not sure until we open this up, or, we need to
Yeah,
put an allowance in for an unknown condition.
yeah, to be determined in field or something.
Yeah.
We try to
But
eliminate that as much as possible, but yeah, that inevitably ends up in the contract because there are some things that the project manager really just wants to get ahead of
exactly.
in the field.
And then your
Uh,
framing, we're all human, right? There's always something, but your example with the 1 2x4, if that happened here, then it's kind of look at both parties, right? Because then it's look at the salesperson and the project manager and the estimator in our case, because we do have a separate person that does the estimate, and say, hey, what can we learn from this? What happened? As opposed to just looking at the salesperson and production sort of pointing the finger kind of thing. And there still
right.
is a little bit of point, there's always going to be a little bit of that, but it helps.
But I guess having the project managers involved in that review does eliminate a lot of the finger pointing because honestly, hey, you got your eyes on this too, and maybe you didn't read it
Right.
closely enough, right? You
Right.
really need, and you just stress this need for the project manager to really dive in deep and understand this project. Like, hey, this is your one shot, and making sure that your, ultimately your paycheck is depending on this, right? So if you're getting bonused on this, this is your chance to make sure that nothing was missed, or if you're not looking at this estimate very deeply, then 3 months from now you're in the middle of this project that's kind of a ship taken on water, and you had an opportunity to ensure that that wouldn't happen, right?
Right.
So not that it's just eliminating blame game, but I do feel like your model for this is something that we're trying to emulate at Cornerstone, just fostering a lot of that collaboration, that teamwork between the field and the office. There's always, and for anybody who's listening on this call, I don't know if you can agree with this, but there always seems to be a little bit of a division, a dissension between office and field.
Yeah.
It's like I don't know if it's just like human nature to kind of like look at the other team and sitting in their air conditioned office when
Yep.
you're, busting your butt out in the field and dealing with, the county, in our case, some inspectors or something. A lot of stressful occurrences happen in the field, especially when you're tearing apart a homeowner's house. So
Yep.
anytime that we get to foster that teamwork environment, we're gonna take it. So we're actually emulating that. And I love your 48-hour review. So I call this one the switchover because ultimately the transfer of power, you mentioned your project developers are the lead up until the job is sold, right? But now,
Right.
so now the job is sold. So after that 48-hour review, you present this contract, and now this gets put into production, right? So your lead switches to the project manager. And is your project developer and your designer still a part of the project after this switchover?
Yeah. So the roles essentially switch. If you picture a boat, that the captain is now the project manager after the sale, but the developer and designer, lead carpenter, whoever's on the team is still on the boat. And so they're there to assist the project manager now, essentially. But beyond that sort of general theme, the next step after a project is sold, other than getting it into our CRM and the accounting and all those kind of details, is a sit down, which is called a package pass, where the full team sits down in the office. Usually it's not the lead carpenter, it's usually the project manager, the developer, and the designer. And now it's passing the project, almost like picture a baton on a relay race.
Yeah.
They both kind of had a switchover period. Now we're handing the baton officially internally off. And they sit down and go over everything. Sometimes at the contract meeting, there's been the client, said, oh, let's take this out. And there's been a handwritten change order at the sale. Some stuff like that comes up once in a while. But more importantly, there's a list of to-do items from there, right? It's great. We signed the contract. Let's celebrate for a night. But as some people say, the work starts now. So we've got
Right.
to get the permit going, and sooner the better, because we don't want to delay on that. We've got to order materials. In our case, before we order cabinets, there's a sit down review with the project manager, a cabinet review, because we order semi-custom cabinets, and we had issues over the years where designers did their best to order them correctly, but sometimes issues came up. So we thought, let's get the project manager's eyes on them because they look at it a little differently.
Yeah.
So there's a
They'll know
number
if
of
that ceiling in that old 1908 farmhouse
exactly,
is really slanted. So, hey, we're going to need a little bit extra on the crown, right? So,
exactly. And
yeah,
sort of the blame game words you threw out, all, there were many times, not only would we not be as efficient on the project, but also it's like, geez, how come the designers don't order more crown, like in that example, or more fillers?
yeah,
We've all heard that. I have a feeling anyone who
a
deals with
tile.
semi-custom,
Yeah.
and it messes the whole thing up because it can take weeks, 3, 4 weeks to get the crown or whatever. And then there's go backs. And so back to your after it's sold, that's an important sit down that we have where the team, there's some forms we use, but they go through all the open items, who's accountable for it, what's the due date on it. And it's important the whole team does that because the designer might be like, oh, the project's not starting for 3 months. We have plenty of time to submit the permit. The project manager is like, no, 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 this
Not
is
away.
in
Yeah.
a certain jurisdiction that's going to take this amount of time. We don't want to get the permit the last day. Those kind of things come up. And then we put them into a software that then sends automated emails on those dates to people to basically remind them that this needs to be done. And they need to basically in that email say it's been done. And then we get exception reports to management if things aren't closed out, and not to beat people up, but to sit down and say, hey, you've got these 5 items on the Jones job that were supposed to have been done last week. What's up? Because we found that those open items were a weak spot for us. And I'm probably not alone. I don't know, but because the
I
sales
doubt you're
team,
alone because I know I can agree with that.
yeah, I mean, our developers, our sales team, they're doing what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to make more sales. So they make the sale and sort of mentally, it's easy for them to move on to the next one, which is what we want them to do. But yet we do need to get some things closed out. So sorry, I rambled a little bit there, but
Yeah, I would love to learn more. Maybe again, like I said, maybe a follow-up webinar because I feel like there's a lot more to that topic that you just mentioned as far as, just reminders, tracking. When
yeah,
you're passing the baton, there's a lot of accountability. Like, hey, look, everybody's counting on you now. You're the
right.
one running with this, and time is of the essence. So, uh, I would love to learn more about your process on that. How are you tracking that? Like
Sure.
what software,
Yeah,
like how automated is that? And because that I feel like can be a pain point, especially as we grow and we're bringing on, and training, onboarding new project
right.
managers. Things get busier. You're selling more, you're producing more, and what often happens is that the paperwork side, the administrative side, sometimes goes lacking, and you're starting to deteriorate the transparency that you're getting with who's doing what and are they actually doing their job.
Right.
So let's talk about like walkthroughs, right? So you still have the developer and the designer part of the project after the project manager. We're talking about once the job actually starts, we know how much meat there is between the construction contract and actually breaking ground, which we were just talking about. Once the job starts, you something that we talked about and we found very similar between our two companies that we have a similar walkthrough strategy. Um, I'll start by saying that ours at Cornerstone is we have a pre-construction walkthrough. This is like midnight hour. Hey, we're about to start. This usually happens 3 to 4 weeks prior to the job starting. We'll do one last big hoorah walkthrough with the project manager, the homeowner, really get a lay of the land. There's some documentation our project manager fills out as far as where he wants the dumpster placed because the office is kind of handling that. Uh, Last little chance to get like some questions answered by the homeowner, and who's part of that is the developer and our project manager and usually the designer and our production manager who's kind of overseeing our PMs just so that he gets a really good pulse on how things are looking, right? But then we also do two more walkthroughs, and we have the same team members present at each one of these walkthroughs. We had a 50% walkthrough, which is typically roughly, again, about halfway through the job. But whether it's right before or right after drywall, we like sometimes to do it before drywall so that we can ensure that, hey, those outlets aren't supposed to be in the backsplash. They're supposed to be underneath the cabinets, right? So we need to fix that before drywall goes up, and this becomes a pain for everyone. But the same crew members are a part of all these walkthroughs. And one, we want to make sure that all the pieces of information that are stored in each one of their heads comes out when it needs to. But two, for the homeowner, it's just consistency, right? they're getting the same team members, and it looks really good for the homeowner to see the same people coming out at each and every time. They feel taken care of, right? So
Mhm.
if that homeowner said something to the designer 3 weeks ago about the tile layout and how it's going to interact with the outlets on the backsplash, that's the time the designer brings that up. Okay, we're actually afraid of how this double stacked herringbone is going to intersect with this window. Can we talk through that? Gives them a really good chance to knowledge share, right? And these walkthroughs. And then our 90%, I think you call it substantial completion, but for us, this is a really good time to document things that are outstanding on the job well before the job is actually getting to like this idea of punch out, right? So we want to get ahead of these things, make sure if there's something that has to be replaced or ordered and it hasn't been, we still have several weeks of the job left to make sure that that is getting ordered and the job isn't dragging on past. So when you talked about your walkthroughs, they were pretty similar, were they not?
Yeah, a couple of details, but yeah, big picture.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the importance of these walkthroughs, documentation. I'll say it over and over and over again. Documentation. We implore our PMs to follow through with the 90% walkthroughs, create the Google Doc, share it with the internal team, tag people like our production coordinator who she handles all of our ordering. Tag her with something. Hey, we need a replacement handle for the dishwasher. Tag her in that so that she can make sure that she's doing her follow up. Just all these things that are needed to make sure that this job is just running very smoothly throughout the entire process because the homeowner's expecting from a design build, especially like yours, Bruce, and like ours, they're expecting white glove service. They want to make sure that this job is running smoothly. And when it doesn't, they've got a bone to pick, right?
Right. Right.
We have
And the other
so
thing,
Darren, hey Darren, how's it going, man? I didn't realize that you were on this. I think probably said the last time because you were on the last one. So Darren just asked, what CRM tool do you use, Bruce?
we use Microsoft Dynamics, and it,
Okay.
works well for us. We had used our own in-house built CRM for many, many years. And as I said earlier in the webinar, I don't feel like developing software is core to what we do. I know AJ, you've got render, so but you've chosen to follow that
Right.
path specifically. Whereas as we said, we want to be the best remodelers we can be, so we went to Microsoft Dynamics at the time. One thing, if I could, real quick, AJ, is you were talking about the paperwork and the importance of documenting like the pre-construction walkthrough and other things. The other thing that I look at the paperwork side of it, well, is I look at processes as only as good as the checks and balances that are included in those processes, because without checks and balances, the just real world, and maybe our team's unique, but they're creative people are going to do creative things, and the consistency might not be there, especially as you grow your business and add to team members and bring on new team members. So I mentioned earlier, we don't assign a project manager until we get our second retainer step. The project manager gets the 48-hour review. Then they have to sign off. It's not just, oh, it's good, to Joe. They're signing off on it. The
And
pre-construction walkthrough, we have a form they have to turn in. So we make sure that's been done. So it's a little bit, I get a little bit the moniker of the checklist guy, and I understand that's probably not the most fun, but we do need certain checks and balances on our process. So just
I
to,
hope everyone from my team is listening to this webinar, or I'm going to send this out to every single one of
why?
them and
So
say,
they'll hate
hey,
me more than they hate
fast,
you?
no, I'm just going to say fast forward to minute 48 of this webinar because I want you to hear it from Bruce. Like he, like, take some heat off of me because yeah, I have this saying called eliminate the one-offs. Because
Yeah.
every time that a process is deviated from, there's always an excuse as to why it happened. It's always, oh, well, this was a one-off because this person needed this, or this was a one-off because we didn't have this in place. But we can always go back and look at, okay, when did this go wrong? When we do root cause analysis, RCA, and we say, when did this actually go wrong? We find out this went wrong the minute that this one process wasn't handled correctly. All right, so then there's always an excuse. Well, we didn't do it that way because we didn't have this in place. So eliminate the one-offs, it's the checks and balances. So you are basically saying this cannot happen unless these three things are
Right.
checked off. Did we do these three things? This one
Right.
wasn't done. We're not letting this through. It has to be done
Right.
because that's the only way that we're going to survive. Like the organized structure of a company that's required of a company your size and kind of the size that we're getting to. It's unbearable when your company is suffering with gross profit dollars or just negative customer experiences, all because things that we've already figured out just aren't being followed, right?
Right. Right.
Tough.
And we all know, anyone listening to this who's a home remodeler, stuff's going to happen. Unexpected variables are going to happen on a project, no matter what we do, in my opinion. I hate saying that, but every job has at least something. And so if we don't do, to your point, the fundamentals consistently, it's not just going to be one or two variables that surprise us on a job. It's going to be 20. And at some point, that's just beyond the
That'll
money and
drown you.
everything else. That just is a bad experience for the homeowner, for our team, and everything else. The other thing I'll add is, between those gates, or those checks and balances we're talking about, we do allow a reasonable amount of freedom for our team. We don't dictate the salesperson in the first appointment needs to go through these 9 specific steps and, all of that. I don't want people listening to think it's that robotic. I don't think we could keep good people
Right.
with that, but it's more, look, you've got some freedom, but when you get to this gate, you need to check off on these things before we go further. So
Same. Yeah, same. Um, let's last thing I'll just mention here is that Bruce, I know this about you guys because I asked it when we did the webinar prep. But like ad hoc walkthroughs, like we definitely I don't know if we incentivize our designers and our project developers to do this, but we definitely encourage it. We encourage them to actually stop by the job sites. Like it doesn't have to be a 50% walkthrough.
mm,
Like cabinets got delivered today, go by.
yeah,
What they'll do is our marketing director is fantastic. He's always saying, hey, if you stop by a job site, take pictures for me. I'll throw it up on Instagram stories and let everybody know, what's happening today. It's a great opportunity for creating marketing content, but it's also a great way for your homeowners to know that you're constantly checking in. Same people are there. They care about the job. They care about the progress. Designers are sending a quick little check and say, oh my gosh, your cabinets got delivered today. I know you're at work, but I can't wait for you to get home to see them. They're beautiful. Just a little note like that to make this experience more human, right?
yeah.
Is we'll take every opportunity we can. So can't implore anybody enough to encourage that through their team members. Let's
And
talk
the
about
other
something
tool we
fun.
use, a
Oh,
lot of people I know use Builder Trend, but we use Builder Trend for a couple different things. But one is the client portal. So in our case, back to
yeah,
pictures, project managers are to take pictures, through the week, not every single day, 12 pictures, but that way, to your point, it allows us to use those on social media and things like that right out of Builder Trend. So,
yeah. We use Job Tread for the same purpose.
mhm.
Yeah. So let's talk about something fun. Wrapping up, what a perfect time because we're going to be running
It's
up on
always
time
been
here
fun,
pretty
AJ.
soon.
What are you talking
Yeah.
about? You
Well, we talked about the nitty-gritty stuff of like
Yeah,
things
yeah.
going wrong on job sites and
Okay, that's fair.
documentation process. I think it's fun. I love process. But so wrapping up, obviously we had a lot of client expectations of how this job was supposed to go. And let's say we nailed it or we didn't nail it, right? We want to make sure that what the customer remembers is likely going to be how we left things, right? So we're always out for getting the good review, and sometimes we have to eat crow, or we have to, kind of go the extra mile to make sure that any like disruptions to this job, whether they were in our control, like I said, or they weren't, the county just took too long, or did something crazy. We want to make sure that they're happy customers in the end. And I loved what you had mentioned, that something I just feel like it should be mentioned here. You sponsor uh, like welcome parties, or I can't remember what you called it, but talk us through that because I think that's a brilliant idea. And I think if we can all take something away from this, this is actually a really unique and fun idea.
So we call it outreach, holistically, but basically at the end of the job, and we're constantly trying to get better, frankly, at this. But what can we do to leave a client, like you said, on a happy note? And some of that's that we actually care and that we want to celebrate the job. So certain projects, we have pre-made baskets. If it is a kitchen, it has kitchen-y stuff in it, or if they have a dog, it has dog stuff in it, and that can be brought during the job or at the end as just a little gift for the client. Other projects where the client and the scope of work warrant it, we'll give the client $500 or something for a little celebration if they want to invite friends, neighbors, family. It's really up to them. We don't, again, we don't dictate how they use it. The intent is that they can have a little celebration in their new kitchen. Hopefully they feel good about it. But as we all know, the other reality is, while those friends and family or neighbors are there, they're going to say, oh, who did this? And, it's a marketing effort as well. So I think that's what you're referring to. The other thing I'll mention
Yeah,
in terms of wrapping up that we've really been focused on is, during COVID, with supply chain issues and everything else that we all dealt with, finishing projects timely was very difficult, almost impossible in some ways, with appliances and cabinets and everything we all dealt with.
yeah,
And at least for us, our clients were amazingly patient during the first year or two of COVID, but then that patience ran out. And the idea of waiting for this or that, just wasn't acceptable. And I understand that. Again, as you said earlier, they're looking for white glove service. They're paying a premium to use us or other design build firms. So really a deep focus on finishing timely on those projects. So that's something we map and track every month. What projects do we have? What projects are hitting the completion date or paid in full and wrapped up by the completion date? What projects aren't? I know that's not as fun
Great
as
KPI.
gifts or
Yeah.
parties, but yeah, we found that's a huge KPI relating to client overall happiness. So
Yeah, if you guys were a part of the webinar last week, I sent a follow-up. I had a question that came up was what are the most important KPIs for me as a remote owner to track? And the question was top 3 or 4. I listed maybe 15 different
yeah,
KPIs. That was one of them, baseline deviation. We're tracking, hey, the project manager said this job was going to start here and finish here. Why didn't it? For good or bad reasons, we're always tracking. That's very important, especially when the job starts to run long. It does give us an opportunity halfway through, if we can see the job dragging on, to allocate additional resources to kind of like pull it back up to its expected end date. Because again, happy customers at the end, the duration of this job, they will start to experience some job fatigue, especially with larger scale. Your average job size being 250, it's that's a big project, and those
right.
big projects take a long time. And the longer you're in someone's home, disrupting their lifestyle, just their routine, it definitely, they start to take it personal, right, and take it out on us because
One
we're
of
the
our
culprit.
weaknesses on this timeline issue was the substantial completion, those final list of 5 or 10 things. To us, the project manager, was easy to kind of let those string out a little bit, or, oh, I'll get back to that, but to the client, it's not done. I want you done. I want you out of my house. So when we track completion, it's 100% completion, full
Yeah.
payment, done. So
Yeah, Darren just asked if I would be willing to share other KPIs. I don't know if that was specifically for me or for you, Bruce, but Darren, I can definitely follow up after this. If you didn't get my email from last week, I'll send you a lot of my KPIs. I'm a big KPI guy. So big process, big, you got the moniker of the checklist guy. I was the whiteboard guy. So, or the flow, I was
okay.
the whiteboard guy and the flow chart guy. So I
Nice.
think my staff got me a little bourbon mug that, said whiteboards,
They got to give you more credit than that, AJ. Just for all
I
of us
know, I
listening,
know.
looking at this visual you've put up on the client customer journey, you deserve more than just the whiteboard guy. I mean, that's strong. That's above whiteboard level.
It's the creative nature, right? So it's the architect, the designer in me.
And if I can
So
share some KPIs, we do a once a month dashboard that we have a lot of KPIs, but that really consolidates them. Just let me know, AJ, if you want me to share some.
I would love that. Yeah, Bruce, I'll do a follow up with you after this. Jeff just asked as well, so maybe we can just kind of catch up. Like, I'll get a couple of your like most favorite KPIs, the ones that are really important for
Sure.
like the success of the overall business. I'll share mine as well, and I'll do a follow up after this webinar and kind of throw them in there. And I'll make sure to highlight some of the ones that we track through the sales side, sales and design as well, since we're kind of in that topic today. But I'm glad I dropped these questions or these topics here because I was like, we're probably going to run out of time, but in case we don't, let's get
Right.
into some of these. But we are just about running up on time here. The one thing I will ask you, Bruce, is something that was I don't know, I kind of dove into a little bit on our webinar prep was obviously your project managers are handling a lot of information. They're part of a design process, right? Kind of tweaking and seeing a space that doesn't exist, right? They're seeing like the creative space in this virtual reality we call our brain. They have to be able to see that, put it together. They have to be able to read plans and understand, but they also have to understand personalities, homeowners, how they're going to react to things. And then also the construction, the budget, the financials. There's a lot of talent there, right? In your project manager. So
Yeah.
when you hire project managers, like how rigorous is that process? I mean, you can't just put a job ad up and hire anybody who just has construction background. I mean, this is a very unique individual. Am I
Right.
right?
Right. Absolutely. So in our case, all of we have 8 project managers. All of them were hired from the field. So they were already with us, which to me is really helpful because that way we can understand their strengths and weaknesses. We can make sure they fit. So when it comes to construction knowledge, okay, check. When it comes to the client experience, dealing with other people, dealing with other teammates, how do they do? Okay, if they've worked with us for 15 years, we check, we know that. The challenge that, not the challenge, the thing we have to focus on with them is typically the paperwork side. And part of it's just understanding the paperwork, not being overwhelmed by it, but part of it's the discipline to do it, because it's not really, for most people, the fun part of the job. It's a little bit like homework in school. So that's something that what we'll do is start to try to work with someone in the field well before we promote them and have them come in the mornings while they're still a carpenter, and show that investment of time and effort to learn. And that way, when they're in the role, it's better. But the reality is that once they're in the role, it takes them about a year to fully get up to what I say 60 miles an hour to get up to full speed. It
Yeah.
takes a while.
Yeah. So for anybody who's listening on that, that's really a key aspect is when you're hiring project managers or training or promoting, really seeing the full picture of what a project manager should be involved in. It may be unique to your company. Maybe you don't follow this exact roadmap that we kind of had out here today, but depending on your own journey that your customers take and your own process, make sure that your project managers are very well suited to handle the entirety of their job from the paperwork side to the budget to the relational piece and so on. I can't stress that enough. Damon just asked if this was going to be recorded. Yes, this is being recorded. I will definitely send this entire webinar out to everybody who signed up. It'll likely go out tomorrow. We wait to post this on YouTube, so that way I can kind of embed it in that email follow-up. And in that follow-up, we'll also include some of these KPIs too. One last little morsel before we go. Change orders.
I love them. Oh, yeah.
So change orders, we didn't get to talk about how change orders, I can go back and show the roadmap of how change orders really show up, pop up like through the journey, right? But how well do you feel like you guys handle change orders? And is there like one piece that you'd want everybody to kind of walk away from today knowing about how Bruce says that you should be looking at change orders a certain way?
First of all, we call them addendums, which I know sounds silly, but most people hear change orders and are scared. Homeowners, I'm talking about especially. Number two is the way we pay people is very helpful, because again, if a project manager doesn't do an addendum, that's going to hurt their compensation. And, as opposed to, I know a lot of project managers are paid more of a base salary with a small bonus. So there's a little bit of a disincentive to have those hard conversations with a homeowner. That's number two. Number three, to us, addendums aren't all the same. A smaller we define it as under $5,000 addendum. Let's just get it done. If we need to handwrite it, the project manager is authorized to just do what they need to do to make it happen. Change orders are over 5,000 require more of a review by the team before it's done. So we look at it because, again, it affects the whole team. If you're talking about a $10,000 change, there's probably some designer help needed depending on what it is. That it's going to affect the salesperson's compensation. So those would be three quick thoughts.
I like that. So, two quick thoughts for me is I like the fact that you have project managers involved in actually pricing these. This is something that we're doing at Cornerstone. We want our project managers. A lot of people take the load off of their project managers on change orders and put it back into the office. We do want the PMs involved in pricing these change orders out. But two, the change orders for us, we limit past the 50%. So one of the other things that we're tracking at the 50% walkthrough is has everything are all the selections done? We shouldn't be waiting on anything else by this point, especially if the customer's dragging their feet on a specific item, but we don't allow change orders past 50% either. We make exceptions, right? So small change orders that really won't affect the scope or the completion timeline, we'll absolutely take those in. We want to make sure the customers are happy, but anything that would disrupt the time of completion for the job, we have the right to turn that into a completely separate project. We do that for two reasons. One is we are trying to book ourselves so far out and we're trying to be very tight with our schedule management. We don't want to disrupt the flow of when we're expecting cabinet deliveries for the next job. So we want to have that control. But two, we also want to make sure that we're not holding up final payment. If we're expecting this job to end on June 12th and I have a change order that's going to add 3 weeks to the job, well, one, it's going to push jobs back, the next one, but also it's going to delay us from getting to a point of substantial completion, especially if it's something that's going to require those inspections. Now we just pushed our entire inspection timeline back to the back end of this change order. So we do have the right to refuse or not refuse, we have the right to turn that change order a completely separate contract. If we can squeeze it in, we'll squeeze it in, but it has no bearing on the completion of the existing job or the payment structure of the existing job as well. So just a little piece of feedback for anybody listening, if
Smart.
that's helpful for you. It's been really helpful for us to be able to just have that power to kind of push that out. So
Mhm.
with that being said, I'll just kind of close out here to say that we have 3 more webinars after this. So if you guys enjoyed this one, like I said, I'll follow up with an email. Next week is on sales training. It's going to be a really good one. I'm actually really excited about this. I kind of geek out with like the sales motion of different companies and how different companies structure, and Steve's got a really good brain for how that works. So if you want to hop on and sign up for any of these webinars, please be my guest. This last page here, I have a QR code. So if you want to schedule any time with me, that QR code is a direct link to my Calendly. Or if you have other suggestions for other webinars, even a follow up with Bruce, Bruce, if you're up to it, I'll let you know what the feedback is, and if we
Sure.
maybe
Yeah.
try to hop on another one to kind of dive a little deeper. But I definitely appreciate your time today on just kind of getting into how Case does it. I mean, you guys set an example for the entire industry. I've always admired how your company it just is structured, how it operates, and of course, kind of what you do for the industry from an altruistic standpoint as well. I mean, a lot of you do a lot of events for the industry, and from the Case Award, kind of highlighting it, just its excellence in the industry. I just love your, I don't know, your dedication to what we're all doing here. So
I appreciate it. Yeah, we're all in
yeah,
the same
the
boat together. So, and thanks for doing these webinars. Hopefully, I'm looking forward to taking away some things and other people can. So,
yeah, great, great. Yeah, so I definitely appreciate your time, Bruce. For everybody who's joining, I'll send a follow up hopefully by the end of the day tomorrow. Again, it's just about how long this takes to get up on YouTube, but again, Bruce, appreciate the time, and I'll look forward to seeing you at the next event. All
deal.
right.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks. I appreciate the time, guys. Take it easy.